What business makes the most money? If you're in business or you want to be in business, how do you learn from the businesses that make the most so that you can make more? If you want to know which company makes the most money, that would most recently be Saudi Aramco, the Saudi oil giant, which makes hundreds of billions of dollars. In previous years, it's been Apple, Microsoft, Google, companies that have headquarters in Ireland. And I look at all those companies and I say, what do they have in common? With the exception, oddly enough, of Saudi Aramco, which actually pays more taxes than you would think, they all have a tax-friendly structure. They all work on legally reducing their taxes. And the reality is, if you're looking at a business to start, or if you're looking at how to make your business make more money, you're probably not going to learn as much from an oil company or even from a large software company. But you can learn the lessons of what they do right. And how do you make your business make more money? One of the easiest ways you can do that is to legally reduce your taxes. Now, the way that your business, whether you own it and work in it yourself, whether you've got a small team, even if you've got hundreds of people, the way that you're going to reduce your taxes is different than the way that a gargantuan tech company like Microsoft is going to do that. But the principles are somewhat the same. And there's a reason that these companies have somewhat of a competitive edge, because they do business globally. They use global structures to reduce their tax. And even though these mega corporations are now going to be subjected to an upcoming global minimum tax where they can't pay 1 or 2 or 3% in some cases, your business will not be subjected, if it's under a large threshold, to those new rules, and you can move your business to wherever you and it are treated best. I see so many business owners that they try and improve the conversion on their website. They try and do more marketing. They try and get the sales team to increase conversion. And those are all things that you should do. You should obviously optimize your sales and marketing funnels. You should improve your product and spending more on delivering a better product, doing research and development, delivering the product better customer service, whatever it may be that your business needs. You may have capital expenditure to put your money into, but here is what I know. There is really no more guaranteed way to make your business make more money than by reducing your business tax burden. And so if you look at the most successful companies, not only do they have high revenue, but they keep more of what they earn. You compare that to companies in, let's say, the United States that are in, let's say, the energy space. They're going to pay a lot higher tax rate. And as much as a lot of Americans, a lot of Westerners think that big corporations never pay taxes, there are plenty of big corporations that pay very high taxes. They often don't make it to the top of these lists because your business could make more money if you reinvested more into the business. And yet a lot of people don't have the money to reinvest because they're paying so much in taxes. I was talking to a friend of mine in the United States who is rolling up. He is basically buying and assembling different kinds of businesses. And his company is structured that by the time he takes some money out to live and he puts the rest of the money back to work, he's paying the high 30% rate. So 37, 38%, something like that in tax. He's basically putting as much money as he can back into buying more businesses. So he's going to get the money to come in from profit from the current business. He's going to take some money out to live. He's going to pay all of his expenses. And then he can put what's left back into buying more businesses. Imagine if his tax rate were 0 or 5 or 10. He'd have that much more money to easily reinvest. And so his system is structured in a way where he says, I do as much marketing as I can to write that off of my taxes. The marketing doesn't always work. Certain things work, certain things don't work, certain things work for a while, and then I have to stop it because it works at a certain level, but when I try and double that, then it just kind of starts fizzling out and the customer acquisition cost no longer works. And so I'm always looking for new ways to market my business so I can get that tax deduction that everyone who pays high taxes is so desperately craving. How do I get tax deductions? And then he says, whatever's left over, I put that back into just going out and buying more businesses. And he consistently does a good job with these roll-ups where, buy a new business, integrate it into the current company, money just keeps coming in. I have a friend who introduced me to someone. He built a $100 million company doing that in the home services space, just buying, combining, sometimes not combining, but just putting under one umbrella. And yet that big tax rate constantly got in the way in the sense of, number one, my friend is doing things that just aren't organic for the business. He's doing marketing, that's great. The marketing works to a certain level. but he doesn't really get the level of deductions he would like. And then he goes back and puts the rest after tax into more stuff. Now, the business that he's in, you can't really compete with if you are not in the United States. It's an on-the-ground business. But if I wanted to compete with your software business, for example, I'm going to have a harder time competing with Apple or Microsoft or Google if I'm only based in the United States. Now, it's harder to compete with those companies, of course, to begin with. But if I have to pay 35, 40, 45% tax, that's a lot less money I get to put into growth. If you look at the idea of doubling a penny a day, you'd have millions of dollars after just 30 days of doubling that one penny. But if you took out a 30% withholding tax every day that basically a lot of entrepreneurs are facing when they're growing their business, you'd be left with merely tens of thousands of dollars. That's the impact of compounding. And that's the benefit that these businesses that keep investing in themselves get to do. You've seen it with Amazon, you've seen it with all the big tech companies. Now, you don't have to be in oil, but you do need to reinvest and you need to keep more of what you have. And so the simplest lesson of business that I think a lot of people actually ignore is that the companies, not with the biggest revenue, but with the best profits win. And so your goal is, how do I make revenues as big as possible, and how do I make costs as low as possible? And so you can lower costs by hiring people overseas. Now, the companies like Apple and Microsoft and Google are hiring people in Ireland, and that is not cheap. It's the fastest growing economy in Europe this year. They're also hiring people all over the world. We've helped people who work for Microsoft in the UAE and who come from Egypt and all over the place. And those people make less, and so they get to take advantage of a global workforce, and you can do that as well. And that could be the beginning potentially of some small tax savings. But they are overall controlling their costs. As one friend of mine said, he said, I used to work for a big company, and we just manage the tax like any other expense. We have a vendor, we have rent, we have whatever. We try and manage that expense as best as possible. We try and negotiate it, and you can't negotiate tax, but you can figure out ways to save it. And so the solution to making your business bigger, the solution to being a business that may not make the most money, but to being in the kind of business that makes the most money, is exactly that simple formula. How do I increase revenue by doing the stuff that you're already doing that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, increasing conversion, better product, putting money back into CapEx, but also lowering costs. And it's a lot easier to lower costs. Now, if you're hiring a bunch of people in the United States, if you're hiring a bunch of people anywhere in the world right now, your costs are going up because inflation is going up and people need more money to live. But if you said, instead of hiring the next 10 people in the United States, we're going to hire them somewhere in Eastern Europe, or we're going to hire them in Latin America, we're going to hire them somewhere in Asia, or anywhere that is near shore or offshore, you may be paying those people more a year from now due to inflation, but you're going to be paying them a heck of a lot less than you're paying someone in the US, in Canada, in Australia. And so if you're expanding and looking to hire people, that's one easy way to win. But once you start, doing that international hiring and you reduce your, payroll costs to a lower percentage than most companies in the industry, now really the only biggest win is saying, well, what about this 30 or 35 or 40% tax bill that we have? And again, you go back and look at the big companies that have successfully reduced that to a level that's so small that the government needs to say, if you're a mega corporation, the governments of the world get together and say, we want you to pay at least 15%. To me, business is simple. And I look at and I talk to, people who do M&A, for example. And a lot of the businesses that they're selling have really low margins. Your goal is to have the highest margins possible by creating a great product, creating a brand. You can do all that from one place. And if that place is going to be Dubai, if that place is going to be Singapore, if that place is going to be Panama, or if that place is going to be somewhere where you live but your company's based somewhere else and you've set that up to work, then you're going to get to keep a lot more of the money from your thought efforts. And so operate overseas, hire overseas, increase your margins by doing the stuff you're already doing, but realize that by lowering taxes, that's a guarantee. Like, the tax code is what it is. It doesn't change based on heads one day, tails the next. It may not be straightforward, but you know exactly what to do if you do proper planning. You don't know if spending more money on postcard mailings or spending more money on Google ads or optimizing the website or increasing the email list or making more YouTube videos or TikToks, like, is that going to work? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And you just keep pushing the easy button every time you find something that works. But the easiest button of all is, here's the law. Everyone has equal access to it. Your competitors don't get to stop you from building your TikTok. They don't get to stop you from lowering your taxes. And so, if you are someone who takes investors from people who want you to be in the Delaware C Corp crowd, there are ways that we've worked with our tax professionals where you can actually, make those structures more tax friendly. But the best kind of structure is when you're just in control of your own business and you say, you know what, I'm willing to go and live somewhere else, incorporate my business somewhere else with the tax rates as low as zero. It even works for Americans, believe it or not. And I'm going to be able to increase my net margins. I mean, when I look at our business, people say, oh, what's your EBITDA, right? We have earnings, but we don't have interest. We have very negligible taxes. The biggest chunk of taxes we have is when we have a lot of people working in one place. We do what's called transfer pricing, and so we will pay a little bit of corporate income tax in somewhere where people are doing work, but it is very limited to a low single-digit percentage of everything. And so essentially, at the parent company level, the tax issue doesn't really exist. We have no depreciation. We have no interest. We really don't have anything that requires amortization. And so EBITDA, which Charlie Munger would say, anytime you hear EBITDA, just replace it with BS. EBITDA is the same as the net. And to me, it's a much more simple way to run a business where you're going back to how do I make revenue as big as possible, but how do I also make costs as low as possible? You don't want to be in a situation where you're playing not to lose. You want to be playing to win. So obviously, you always want to drive revenue growth. You want to drive product. You want to push brand, sales, marketing, et cetera. But have someone on the team focus on how are we reducing those expenses, with tax being the biggest one, with staffing, if you're expanding staffing. I'm not necessarily saying get rid of anybody you have now, but if you're going to hire more people, or if people are leaving due to attrition, how do we replace those people overseas? And that can be the basis to doing something that all the people in Silicon Valley, for example, practice at the high level, but when you're starting, they don't want you to practice. They want you to be in the United States, they want you to run the C Corp, and it's just not tax optimized. That's the secret to being the business that makes the most money. Maybe not the most money in the world, but the most money in your sector. And when you make the most money in your sector, when you make more money, when you have higher margins, when you have better EBITDA, better net than your competitors, you're able to reinvest faster. You're able to leave them in the dust because you're compounding so much faster than they are. That is what's happening for a lot of smart companies now, and it's exactly what Nomad Capitalist helps entrepreneurs do. Or if you come and say, hey, here's where I'm living now. It's me and it's my partner. I'm in California, he's in Texas, and we'd like to move to one of these 5 places, or maybe you have somewhere better to suggest to us. How does that work? Do we stay in American compliance? We want to keep 10 people in an office in Austin. We want to hire 20 new people where we're going to go, or maybe there's somewhere new we should consider. How do we handle taxes there? How do we handle taxes where the employees are? How do we manage that with the U.S.? We have operations in different places. Where do we bank? Where do we incorporate? Where do we do all this stuff? That's exactly what Nomad Capitalist does to help entrepreneurs who are successful get started to begin with, because it's so much easier to get started in the first place than to clean up the mess later. And if you do that, you can save, over the course of the next decade, millions, if not tens of millions of dollars you can put back to work in your business, just like my friend would love to do. If he could run his business from anywhere in the world, you can do that too. And you can be the business that makes the most money of any of its kind.